Thanks, everybody. Okay. Oh, okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. I'm Mike Torsai, the Majority Leader. I'm joined by my colleague, Bill Adolph, the Appropriations Chair. The two of us will be speaking today about the House Republican proposed budget. In addition, we have with us our other leaders from the caucus, Stan Saylor, who is our whip, Sandy Major, who is our caucus chair, Dave Reed, who is our policy chair, Dick Stevenson, who is our caucus administrator, Mike Verb, who's our caucus secretary. In addition, we have many members, if not all, of the Republican House Appropriations Committee who have done such significant work with respect to the formulation of the House Republican budget. Please understand, we are excited about the fact that we are governing and that we are acting in an expeditious and responsible manner. It is our goal to really prioritize spending in a fiscally responsible manner, to do so without increasing taxes, to do so without any reckless borrowing, like the Senator Specter Library or the Congressman Murtha Center, and to do it on time. And that means that as a group, we have worked hard looking over the governor's proposal, which I think set forth an important blueprint. We heard loud and clear what the electorate, what the citizens of Pennsylvania told us in the last election. Everybody needs to control spending. You need to prioritize your spending. You need to invest in the appropriate areas. Come on, Mark. Come on. Invest in the appropriate areas, but you need to do so focused on the taxpayers. We are fiscal stewards of the hard-earned money of the taxpayers of Pennsylvania. And let me make it clear, you just cannot spend to spend. That's what got us into the deficits that we were in the first place. We began the Rendell administration spending $20 billion, and it ended spending over $28 billion. $8 billion increase in spending in 8 years' time. That's a 2-to-1 spending over the rate of inflation. Almost 40% growth in spending when the rate of inflation was about 21%. And that's been a problem. And keep in mind, we've been relying on the last 2 years on federal stimulus dollars that we all knew were going to be gone. Everybody knew that, Democrat and Republican alike. As we move forward, I want to make sure that you recognize, however, we are not shirking our duties with respect to governing here in Pennsylvania. With respect to education, please understand that we are spending $9.6 billion on K-12 education in the House Republican proposal under our Appropriations Chair, Bill Adolph. Last year, the state spend on public education was $9.3 billion. The federal stimulus money is gone, but we recognize our duty and we are standing by it, although we are living within the four corners of the fiscally responsible numbers that the governor put forth. In addition, with respect to welfare, and my colleague will be getting into far more detail on this, yes, we are looking at rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse in welfare because we think it has to happen. Democratic Auditor General Jack Wagner himself pinpointed at least $400 million that could come out of this budget based on waste, fraud, and abuse. So yes, with respect to the governor's proposal, we are putting forth less in welfare because we think that waste, fraud, and abuse has to be rooted out. But that does not mean we're still not meeting our obligations. We are still $136 million over the 2010 spend, or a 1.29% increase. And overall, we are spending $10.7 billion of the taxpayers' money in state dollars in the Department of Welfare. That's not to even speak about the federal dollars that we'll be spending. So here's the goal. The goal is to have an on-time, no tax increase budget without reckless borrowing, and that prioritizes spending and does so within the four corners of the governor's blueprint. And it means that you don't get to spend every dollar of the taxpayers' money that comes in. It means you have to be prudent and smart about it. And I will tell you, our appropriations chair, the appropriations staff, the appropriations committee, and our leadership team took this responsibility very seriously, and I think came up with a product that we can all be proud of. I think the Pennsylvania citizens, once they see our proposal, are going to say, my goodness, it's about time that you got it done on time. It's responsible. It protects the taxpayers. It meets the needs of the citizens of Pennsylvania. And we're appreciative that you are willing to work hard and get it done. I will tell you that our timeline is to have this bill passed out of the House well before the end of May. And I'm going to turn it over right now to my colleague and chair, Bill Adolph of the Appropriations Committee. Bill.
Thank you, Michael. I was walking down here and I lost my speech, but I'm glad Mike found it. Everything that Michael said regarding the state tax dollars is what we tried to do. Obviously, the spending that's been going on over the last several years, we had to reverse it. We had to control spending. With the loss of the federal stimulus money, it made the job much more difficult. Make no mistake about that. There was over $1 billion in federal stimulus money spent last year in education, over $1.7 billion in the Department of Welfare in federal stimulus money. There's money, $850 million spent in the Department of Corrections. So it made our job much more difficult. And no one on the appropriations staff or a member of this appropriations committee takes pleasure in reducing programs that mean something to someone. However, time and time again, we heard in the budget hearings regarding not only error rate, but we talked about fraud. Now, folks, the Department of Welfare job is to get scarce and needed money to those that need it the most. And if we did not take the first step in reducing the fraud in this budget for the Department of Welfare, this was our fastest growing line item in our state budget. And we did not just slash and cut welfare. We used a 4% error rate that former Secretary of Welfare, Estelle Richmond, agreed to. Former Governor Rendell agreed to. The Federal Center for Medicaid Service in Washington, D.C. agreed to. And we applied it to some of the largest line items in the Department of Welfare and found immediate savings. We also instituted co-pays for some of the medical assistance, and we applied these principles all across the board. We started with the unfulfilled vacant positions in the welfare system, in the welfare department. We did this in the Department of Transportation. We did this in the Department of Agriculture. If those positions were not filled, we did not budget for those unfulfilled positions. And this saved us an awful lot of money. The taxpayers need an educated constituency. From K to 12, we heard regarding getting it back to pre-stimulus money. That was our goal, to get it back to pre-stimulus money. Every school district in Pennsylvania, when they were the recipients of the federal tax dollars, They were told this is a one-time check. It's going to end June 30th, 2011. Make sure it's for one-time programs. Do not develop new programs. Every superintendent in Pennsylvania realized that. We increased basic ed funding from the governor's proposal by $100 million, getting every school district in Pennsylvania at least back to the 2008-2009 basic ed funding level. In addition to that, many of our school districts, suburban Philadelphia, suburban Allegheny County, central Pennsylvania, the governor applied an aid ratio to a, in my opinion, little-known fact that the state was paying 1/2 of the school district Social Security. So we just went back to the distribution and the payment prior to applying aid ratio. This was a $43 million distribution to those school districts. In addition, as you know, this caucus has always felt that those accountability grants helped our school districts because it gave them flexibility. We restored $100 million of the $220 million in accountability grants for a total increase of K-12 as compared to Governor Corbett's budget, $223 million restoration. The 14 state-owned colleges, our state system, I think everybody standing behind me was as surprised as you were when the governor proposed a 54% decrease in funding for our 14 state-owned universities. Many of these universities are the economic engine in those communities. We brought them back up. We restored where they are going to be receiving 85% of last year's funding. 85% for the 14 state-owned universities. As far as the 4 state-related universities, we restored their funding up to 75%, from 51% to 75% of last year's funding. This is a combined increase for higher education of $377 million. Our caucus believes in education, and we put our money where our mouth is. We went through each line item. We cut the legislature $15 million from last year's budget, a 5% decrease. We restored funding to the trauma centers and also to the 4 or 5 academic hospitals that we have statewide. So we believe, working within the parameters, and remember, we're not out of the recession yet. Right? We are slowly but surely recovering. And it's fantastic that unemployment in Pennsylvania is much better than our surrounding states. But we cannot spend more than what we're going to take in. And the 4% revenue projection by Governor Corbett, I believe we can reach. We do not have to raise taxes in our proposal. And I believe that the decreases are shared among the entire Commonwealth of Pennsylvania instead of putting some of the burden on some of our educational institutions. So if we want to get into additional details, you can fire away with questions.